October 4th, 2019. In a small, quiet village in Kerala, something was happening that no one could have imagined. A place known for peace and prayer suddenly became the center of national attention. The church cemetery, normally silent, was crowded that day. News reporters, police teams, medical staff, and even forensic experts had all gathered. And they were there to dig up graves. But not just one grave. Not two. 6 graves. 6 bodies. All buried in that same church cemetery. All from the same family. The well-known, respected, and educated Panamatam family. The people of the village watched with a mix of shock and sorrow. For years, they had trusted this family, prayed beside them, and mourned with them. Now they stood in disbelief as the remains of 6 of its members were being exhumed. What made it even more heartbreaking? These weren't recent deaths. They had occurred between 2002 and 2016, spread across 14 years. And yet all 6 graves were being reopened because someone believed the deaths weren't natural, that they weren't accidents, that they were murders. But who believed that? The shocking part is, it came from within the family. 2 surviving members had been living with suspicion in their hearts, watching, waiting, hurting, and finally, they raised their voices. They asked authorities to investigate, because they believed the deaths were not what they seemed. They believed the killer was among them, and they were right to be suspicious. One of the 6 victims had undergone a post-mortem, and the report revealed something terrifying. The cause of death: cyanide poisoning. That single detail changed everything. It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't a natural illness. It was deliberate. It was planned. That's when police began to take things seriously. And slowly, as they dug deeper, not just into the graves, but into the family's history, a name began to appear. Again and again. Jolly Joseph, the elder daughter-in-law of the Panamatam family, wife of Roy Thomas, a woman everyone thought they knew. Smart, soft-spoken, respectable. People believed she worked as a lecturer at NIT Calicut in the Commerce Department. She had 2 children. She was active in the church, always smiling, and always polite. But slowly, that image began to crumble. Police discovered that much of what people believed about Jolly was a lie. She wasn't a lecturer. She had faked her education and her job for years. She had created a life based on appearances. But behind that mask, something darker was hiding. It turned out, Jolly had been closely connected to every single death in the family. Let's look at the timeline. 2002, Anna Thomas, her mother-in-law, died suddenly. 2008, Tom Thomas, her father-in-law, passed away. 2011, Roy Thomas, her husband, was found dead. That's when cyanide was detected. 2014, Matthew, Roy's uncle, died unexpectedly. 2016, Alfine, the 2-year-old daughter of Roy's cousin, died after having food. 2016, Sely, Alfine's mother, died shortly after. 6 deaths. All close family. All sudden, and all with one thing in common: Jolly was present. It was no longer coincidence. It started to look like strategy, a plan carried out with patience. One death at a time. What shocked the nation wasn't just the number of deaths, but who was suspected. A woman like Jolly. Educated, respected, a mother, a churchgoer. Now accused of cold-blooded, calculated murder. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She stood in front of her family, year after year, even cried at the funerals. But behind those tears, was there guilt? Or was it just part of the act? When the police finally arrested her, the headlines exploded. A woman who had built a life around lies was now being called a serial killer. Was it about money? Property? Control? Was she trying to remove anyone who stood in her way? Even today, there are questions that remain unanswered. But one thing is certain: the village, the family, and the entire country were left shaken. Because evil didn't come in the form of a stranger. It came from someone they loved, someone they trusted. And that is the scariest part. Before we unravel this disturbing case from India, if real-life crime stories keep you up at night, if you're drawn to the shocking, the strange, and the sinister, then you've just found your people. On this channel, we uncover chilling true crime cases from India and beyond, each one more unbelievable than the last. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because you won't want to miss a single story that makes you question everything. Ready? Before we dive into the story, let's take a step back and ask ourselves, who was Jolly Joseph? Her full name was Jollyama, but to everyone around her, she was simply known as Jolly. She came from a humble Christian family, living near Koodathayi, a quiet little area tucked away in the heart of Kerala. Her father worked the fields. He was a farmer, just like many others in the village. But Jolly? She never felt satisfied with that life. A life built around sweat, soil, and survival, where every day was a cycle of struggle, working from dawn to dusk, only to earn just enough to eat. That wasn't the life she wanted, because Jolly was different. She was a woman with big dreams. Her heart longed for more, for luxury, for status, for a life far beyond what her parents had ever known. She imagined a world where she didn't have to struggle, where she could live with dignity, comfort, and respect. And maybe, just maybe, that's why she fell for Roy Thomas. Roy came from a family that had everything she ever dreamed of, the Panamatum family. Educated, wealthy, respected. They were a name in Kerala society. To Jolly, marrying Roy wasn't just about love. It was a chance to step into a life that had always felt out of reach. A chance to leave behind the dust of the farmland and step into the polished floors of a respected household. But what no one knew then was how far she would go to hold on to that dream. Their very first meeting took place at a family gathering party hosted by Roy's maternal uncle, Matthew Manshadil. Now here's something interesting. Jolly was actually the daughter of Matthew's brother-in-law. So technically, Roy and Jolly were distant relatives. Not close enough to raise alarms, but close enough to make things complicated later on. It was at that event where they first saw each other. And from that simple encounter, something began to grow. No fireworks, no drama. Just two young people, connected by family, slowly drawn to one another. As time passed, that spark turned into something deeper. They started falling in love. Eventually, Roy made up his mind. He told his family straight. He wanted to marry Jolly, but the road to marriage wasn't smooth. The biggest obstacle? Roy's father, Tom Thomas. Tom was strongly against the match. Why? First of all, the background differences were impossible to ignore. Jolly came from a simple working-class family, while Roy belonged to a well-established, respected household, the Panamatum family. There was a clear gap in status, lifestyle, and family standing. Secondly, the fact that they were distant relatives made the idea even more uncomfortable for some in the family. But Roy, he wasn't ready to let go of Jolly. He was serious about her. He spoke to his father again, this time with stronger reasoning. He told him Jolly was well educated. She had even completed her post-graduation. And that one fact changed everything. Because for Roy's family, especially his father, education meant everything. It was the one value they held in the highest regard. And so, finally, the family gave in. In the year 1997, both families came together, and Roy and Jolly got married. It looked like the perfect union. Love, education, and family approval. After the wedding, Jolly did struggle a bit to adjust to her new home and new family. But over time, she made her place in the household. She slowly earned everyone's trust, and eventually, she had a place in their hearts. She wasn't just loved by the family. The neighbors adored her too. She was polite, respectful, and deeply religious. To those around her, Jolly was the very image of a perfect wife and daughter-in-law. Not long after the wedding, Jolly and Roy welcomed their first child, a baby boy, whom they named Remo. Since Jolly was believed to be highly educated, Her mother-in-law, Anama Thomas, began encouraging her to look for a job. She even told Jolly not to worry about caring for Remo. "I'll take care of the baby," she said. "You focus on finding a job. You have such a good degree, it would be a waste not to use it." But here's the thing. Jolly had no desire to work. She never wanted a job, and this created occasional tension in the family. Small arguments, subtle exchanges, a growing discomfort. Then, one day, Anama said something that shook Jolly to her core. "When your father visits next time, I'll ask him to speak with you about getting a job." And in that moment, Jolly became terrified. Because behind all the appearances, behind all the smiles and the image of a perfect woman was a massive lie. Jolly wasn't educated. She had no degree. She was actually a college dropout. And if her father came, if he spoke to her in-laws, that lie would come crashing down. And Jolly couldn't let that happen. Then came the year 2002. The whole family was at home. It was a regular day until it wasn't. Suddenly, Anama's daughter, Renji, cried out from another room. "Amama has fallen." Everyone ran toward her. They lifted Anama and rushed her to the hospital. Her face had turned red. She looked confused and disoriented. And she kept repeating the same thing, "It feels like I'm going to die." It wasn't long before those words came true. Just a short while after reaching the hospital, Anama passed away. The doctors examined her. And since she was elderly and already had health concerns, they concluded it was a natural death. The official cause, stroke. The family was shattered. It had happened so suddenly, so unexpectedly. But while the rest of the house mourned, something else was quietly happening. Jolly stepped forward. In just a few days, she began to fill the space Anima had left behind. Not just physically, but in terms of authority. She wasn't just Roy's wife anymore. She became, in many ways, the central figure of the family. The daughter-in-law had slowly become the one everyone listened to. As time went on, Roy's sister, Renji Thomas, started to notice something odd. It hadn't even been that long since their mother, Anama, passed away. But somehow, Jolly had already taken over all the responsibilities of the household. Every decision, every matter. It all started going through Jolly. Quietly, almost without anyone realizing, she had assumed the role Anama once held. Now keep in mind, Anama wasn't just a homemaker. She was a respected teacher, someone the entire community looked up to. She held a reputation for intelligence and discipline, and people listened when she spoke. And perhaps Jolly wanted that same kind of respect. Maybe that's why, one day, she suddenly told everyone that she had landed a professor's job at NIT Calicut, with a salary of 40,000 rupee per month. Just like that, her image in the community went through the roof. A woman who was managing her family and also working at one of Kerala's most prestigious institutions? People were in awe. They admired her even more. She became something of a role model, a woman who could do it all. Around this same time, in 2005, Roy's younger sister got married. Not long after, she moved abroad to start a new life with her husband. Sometime later, their father, Tom Thomas, went to visit Renji at her place. And during that visit, Renji could sense something was bothering him. He looked distant, troubled. She finally asked him, "Is everything all right at home, Akka?" At first, Tom stayed quiet. But eventually, he opened up. He told her that there was a man, MS Matthew, who had started coming around the house, coming specifically to meet Jolly. And Tom didn't like it. Not one bit. Matthew was actually related to the family. He was the son of Anama's elder brother. He worked as a salesman at a gold shop. But it wasn't the visits alone that raised concern. It was the way Jolly acted around him. She would often go off to some quiet place just to speak to him on the phone. For long periods of time, their conversations weren't casual. They were frequent, personal, and suspicious. Tom had noticed all of this, and he started questioning Jolly about her closeness with Matthew. Those questions soon turned into arguments, clashes that slowly created tension between the two. Something wasn't right. In the year 2008, Roy's father, Tom Thomas, had a daily habit. He would take one mushroom tablet every day to maintain his health. And on this particular day, it was Jolly who brought him the tablet. A small gesture, one that seemed ordinary. But soon after taking the tablet, Tom Thomas began to feel uneasy. He felt sick, seriously sick. He stumbled and collapsed near the wash basin. And Jolly was right there. She saw the whole thing unfold in front of her eyes. After a few tense moments, she called for help. Neighbors rushed in, people gathered quickly, and they didn't waste a second. They carried Tom Thomas and rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. Shortly after arriving, Tom Thomas was declared dead. Doctors called it a natural death, a heart attack, perhaps. No one doubted it. No one raised any questions, and no one even thought of requesting a post-mortem. On the day of the funeral, however, some people started noticing something odd. Jolly was talking quietly with MS Matthew, again and again, whispered conversations, stolen glances. It caught attention. But still, people thought, maybe it's just stress. Maybe it's nothing. There had been 6 years between Anema Thomas's death and this one. And because of that gap, no one even thought to connect the two events. A few months later, Jolly became pregnant again. And she and Roy welcomed their second child, a baby boy named Reynald. But things didn't get any easier after that. Soon, Roy's business began to fail. Losses piled up. Financial troubles hit the family hard. And naturally, the strain started to show in Roy and Jolly's relationship. Then came a moment that changed everything. One day, Roy brought out a will according to the will. All property was to go to Roy and Jolly. Nothing for his brother Rojo Thomas or his sister Renji Thomas. But when Renji looked at the document, something felt off. There was no government stamp, no witness signatures. That single piece of paper triggered something in her, a small spark of suspicion. She didn't say much, but she quietly kept a photocopy of the will, just in case. From that point on, Roy's relationship with his siblings became tense, and his marriage to Jolly started to fall apart too. He had also found out about Jolly's growing closeness to MS Matthew, that same MS Matthew, the one who kept visiting the house. The situation worsened so much that Jolly wanted a divorce. Then came the year 2011. It was an ordinary evening. Jolly, like always, cooked dinner for the whole family. She fed the children early and put them to bed. Later, Roy sat down for his dinner rice and Hana dal, lovingly served by Jolly. But within moments of eating, Roy suddenly felt extremely sick. He stood up from the table, stumbled toward the bathroom, and locked the door behind him. Jolly panicked. She screamed. She called for the neighbors. They all came running and together broke open the door. Inside the bathroom, they found Roy lying unconscious in a corner, foam coming out of his mouth. He was rushed to the hospital. But on the way, Roy died. At the hospital, a familiar face arrived, Matthew. But this was not Jolly's boyfriend, MS Matthew. This was Uncle Matthew, Roy's paternal uncle. He couldn't believe it. Roy was still so young. How could he be dead? It didn't sit right with him. So Uncle Matthew pushed hard for a post-mortem. This would be the first post-mortem ever conducted in the family. And then came the shock. Roy had died of cyanide poisoning. A sudden, violent, irreversible death. But even then, Jolly had an answer. She told everyone that Roy had been under immense stress due to debt, and that he must have taken his own life. A tragic suicide. The family believed her. The community believed her. And just like that, the investigation was closed. Before we continue with the story, it's crucial to understand what cyanide really is and how it affects the human body. Cyanide is an extremely dangerous chemical, one that ordinary people rarely come across. It's mostly used in industries, like the manufacturing of paper, textiles, plastics, and pesticides. Also, cyanide plays a role in refining precious metals like gold and silver, helping separate them from ore. When cyanide enters the body, it disrupts the ability of cells to use oxygen properly. It's almost like the body's breathing is being blocked from the inside. What's truly frightening is how fast cyanide acts. If someone ingests cyanide, within minutes they can become dizzy, start vomiting, and eventually collapse. Without quick medical intervention, survival chances drop drastically. Understanding this gives us a clearer picture of how deadly cyanide poisoning can be, and why it's so important to take seriously in any investigation. Within just a year of Roy's death, Jolly made a shocking move. She claimed ownership over the family's property and slowly began transferring everything into her own name. She had all the legal documents with her, so no one really questioned it at first. But here's where things get strange. These were the same property papers that Jolly had once shown to Roy's siblings, Renji Thomas and Roho Thomas. But now the documents looked different. This time they had official government stamps. They had witness signatures. And that's exactly what raised suspicion. Renji was stunned. How could the same documents exist in two different versions? She remembered clearly what she had seen before. She even had a copy of those earlier papers. And those had no stamp, no signature, nothing to make them legally valid. That's when Renji and Roho made a decision. They gathered some close relatives, trusted family members, and showed them both versions of the papers. It was undeniable. Jolly had fabricated the documents. She had created a fake version to try and take over the property. And with that, her entire plan fell apart. She couldn't get the property under her name, at least not legally. Now Renji and Roho were furious. They thought seriously about taking her to the police, filing a case, holding her accountable for fraud. But then another thought crept in. What about Roy's children? If Jolly went to jail, who would take care of those two little boys? They didn't want the children to suffer, so, despite everything Jolly had done, they held back. No legal action was taken. Meanwhile, Roy's uncle, Uncle Matthew, still visited the family from time to time. And during one of his visits, he made a disturbing discovery. Jolly was having an affair with MS Matthew. And as it turns out, their relationship had grown deep too close to ignore. When Uncle Matthew found out, he confronted her. There were arguments, tense, heated exchanges. But Jolly wasn't backing down. She and her boyfriend, Matthew, were already too entangled. It was the year 2014. One day, Jolly suddenly called Renji. There was urgency in her voice. She said that Uncle Matthew had suddenly fallen sick. She told Renji that she had taken him to the hospital and was with him now. But then came the shocking part. Jolly said, "Uncle Matthew is no more." Renji froze. Just 2 hours ago, literally 2 hours, she had spoken to Uncle Matthew herself. He sounded completely fine, cheerful even. No signs of illness, no complaints, nothing. And yet, here was Jolly now, saying he was gone. When Renji asked how that was even possible, Jolly repeated what the doctor had told her. Uncle Matthew had died of a heart attack. Soon, word began to spread. It was said that Jolly had gone to visit Uncle Matthew that day, and he had been home alone at the time. And strangely, the only person who informed everyone about his death was Jolly. People learned about Uncle Matthew's passing entirely through her. And the most chilling part? Nobody suspected Jolly, not even once. No questions were asked. No fingers were pointed. No one thought anything was off. And just like that, another death in her circle gone without a postmortem, gone without a single doubt. A few days later, a new shocking chapter began to unfold. Jolly, now deeply embedded in the family, started having an affair, not just with anyone, but with Roy's own cousin. His name? Shaju. Shaju was a respected school teacher, known for his steady income and simple lifestyle. But there was a complication. He wasn't a single man. Shaju was already married to a woman named Sely. They had built a small, peaceful life together, and they were raising 2 children, a son, Abel, and a little daughter named Alfine. In 2014, on what should have been an ordinary family gathering, something unimaginable happened. In the middle of the function, little Alfine suddenly fell ill. At first, everyone thought it was something minor. Maybe food had gotten stuck in her throat. But the panic in her tiny eyes, the way she struggled to breathe, it was clear this was something serious. Everyone rushed to get help. They hurried Alfine to the hospital, where doctors placed her on a ventilator. But despite their efforts, Alfine didn't make it. She passed away soon after arriving at the hospital. Everyone believed it was a tragic accident, a horrible twist of fate that took a child far too soon. Because of that belief, no one demanded a post-mortem. No one asked questions. No one imagined that something darker could be hiding behind the tragedy. And the most devastating part? Alfine was just a 2-year-old baby girl. A few days after little Alfine's tragic death, her mother, Sely, began to spiral into depression. The grief of losing her 2-year-old daughter became too much to bear. Emotionally drained and physically weak, Sely was struggling to cope, and Jolly saw that as an opportunity. Slowly, quietly, she began to inch closer to Sely, offering comfort, support, and sympathy. She gained Sely's trust. And once that trust was firmly in place, Jolly made a suggestion. Sely had opened up to her, saying she had no energy, that she was tired all the time and felt like her body just wasn't working right. That's when Jolly recommended something that had worked wonders for others, a mushroom tablet. She claimed her own father-in-law used to take it daily to maintain his health, and it could help Sely too. Time passed. Then one day in 2016, Jolly, Shaju, and Sely were all sitting together in the lobby of a dental clinic waiting for an appointment. As casually as ever, Jolly handed Sely a mushroom tablet. Sely took it, unsuspecting. But within moments, her condition took a terrifying turn. She started writhing in pain, panicking, gasping. Something was terribly wrong. Shaju and Jolly rushed her to the hospital as fast as they could. But there was nothing the doctors could do. Sely was declared dead. What no one knew at that moment was that the mushroom tablet she took that day had already been laced with cyanide long before she ever swallowed it. Yes, Jolly had poisoned her. But once again, you'd think this would be it, right? That this would finally be the moment Jolly was caught? Not even close. The doctors, suspecting foul play, insisted on a post-mortem. But Shaju refused. He told them plainly, "We don't do things like that in our family." And just like that, no autopsy, no investigation, though no justice for Sely and Jolly. She walked away, again, without a single scratch. At Sely's funeral, it was Jolly who took charge of all the arrangements. She handled everything herself, organizing, coordinating, managing every detail, as if the entire responsibility lay on her shoulders alone. Renji watched all this closely and noticed something unusual. There was a calmness about Jolly that didn't quite fit with the grief of losing a family member. Her body language showed subtle signs, not just calmness, but almost a faint sense of satisfaction. It was clear to Renji that Jolly's emotions were not what they seemed on the surface. This planted a seed of suspicion in Renji's mind. Could it be possible that Jolly was involved in these deaths? Even though she felt this strongly, Renji didn't have any solid evidence to prove her suspicions yet. It was just a troubling feeling she couldn't shake. After Sely's death, Shaju found himself without a partner. Jolly was also alone. Within a year, Shaju and Jolly got married. The news hit Renji hard. Her doubts about Jolly suddenly turned into certainty. She no longer questioned that something was seriously wrong. Driven by her suspicion, Renji went back to examine her brother Roy's post-mortem report. The cause of death was listed as cyanide poisoning. That alone was shocking. But the report revealed more. It said that Roy's stomach contained undigested rice and Bengal gram. This detail raised a huge red flag for Renji. When she had once asked Jolly about what Roy had eaten the night he died, Jolly had claimed Roy only ate lunch and skipped dinner. But how could his stomach show undigested food if he hadn't eaten after lunch? The pieces didn't add up. Renji realized that Jolly was lying. Roy must have eaten dinner that night, and that meal was poisoned with cyanide. With these suspicions growing stronger, Renji approached several police officers. She shared everything she had observed, every doubt, every unusual detail she had uncovered. This sparked a police investigation. The investigation uncovered shocking truths. Jolly had never worked at NIT Calicut. Contrary to what she had claimed, she would sometimes visit the campus, but only to sit in the canteen, never as an employee. There was no record of any staff member named Jolly working there. Even more astonishing, her NIT ID card and all her academic degrees were discovered to be fake. Every credential she had presented was forged. Jolly reached out to her son Remo in a panic, telling him, "Everyone is trying to trap me. You need to talk to your aunt and make sure she stops all this." Without wasting a moment, Remo called his Aunt Renji and asked, "What is going on?" Renji, confused and cautious, said, "You don't belong in any of this." At that time, Remo was living in another city, but after hearing the troubling news, he immediately traveled to his mother's place. There, he questioned Jolly directly. "Is everything true? Have you done something wrong?" Under the weight of the situation, Jolly admitted, "Yes, I have made some mistakes." That very same day, Remo called his Aunt Renji again. Meanwhile, the forensic team was busy analyzing 6 bodies. Cyanide was detected in 2, those of Roy and Sely. Tests on the other older bodies came back negative, meaning no poison was found. The next morning, worried for Remo's safety around Jolly, Renji and others rushed to bring him back home. Renji was deeply concerned for his well-being. At the very same time, the police arrested Jolly. They found a bottle of cyanide at her house. Alongside her, Matthew was also taken into custody, the man accused of supplying cyanide to Jolly. Renji then took custody of Roy and Jolly's 2 children. To keep them safe, Jolly now faces 6 murder charges. However, there's still no definitive proof that she committed all 6 murders. Shaju has stepped forward as her defense lawyer. Currently, Jolly is behind bars in a district prison in Kerala. When Renji visited her in prison and asked why she did all this, Jolly's chilling response was, "It just happened. I have a criminal mind. I'm an expert at hiding things. The Bible says God forgives everyone, and He will forgive me too." As mentioned before, this case is still ongoing, and investigations continue. Jolly's defense claims she is being framed, targeted over property disputes. The cyanide bottle found in her home was allegedly planted, and though it's true Jolly had fake degrees, that alone doesn't make her a murderer. Shaju supports this claim, saying Jolly is being set up just to lose her property. So, dear viewers, what do you think? Is Jolly really behind these 6 murders? Or is someone else pulling the strings? Or is she just a victim of a larger conspiracy over property? Make sure to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. We'll see you again with another gripping true crime story.